Breonna Taylor and the recent shooting of Jacob Blake. Do you feel racial injustices are occurring in this nation? And if so, what can be done to address them?
Well, I think they were tragic events, and I do feel that we have to also take into consideration that if you look at our police, they do a phenomenal job. You'll have people choke, make mistakes, and they happen. It happens where they have to make a fast decision, and some bad things happen. And you also have bad apples, but you have 99% great people. I know the police forces very well. I think almost every one of them, if you look, I've been endorsed by so many of them. And these are great people. And I will say this, if you're going to stop crime, we have to give the respect back to the police that they deserve. They've done a fantastic job in so many locations, but then bad things happen. Look at New York. New York was a very safe city. Rudy Giuliani did a fantastic job. The city was safe, and then all of a sudden we have a mayor. He starts cutting the police force, and crime is up 100%, 150%. I saw one form of crime up 300%. So I think it's very important, whether you talk Seattle, where they have very good police, but they're not allowed to do their job. You have to allow the police to do their job. I agree with you. Those events are terrible, but we have to allow the police to do their job. Otherwise, crime is going to soar. Now, the problem is that in Democrat, usually liberal Democrat-run cities, we have tremendous problems. The top 10 most unsafe cities are run by Democrats. You go into the top 25 and top 35, almost every one of them is run by Democrats. No cash bail, just weak policies on crime. We have to give the police the respect that they deserve, and we have to give them their mojo. We have to let them protect us. How about that horrible crime that took place 2 days ago, where this terrible human being walks up to a police car with two people sitting in the car, and he starts shooting bullets right through the glass, right in their face, and just has destroyed. I mean, I hear they're going to make it, but they're going to have a hard time ever being the same.
Mr. President, you're right.
And it's just a terrible thing.
That was monstrous. There's no question about that. But a lot of people look at the statistics.
But that's a lack of respect. When somebody can do that, that's a lack of respect. There's no retribution. They feel there's no retribution. This guy walks up to a police car and he starts shooting point blank range at two innocent people. You can't let that happen. You have to be very tough on crime when it comes to things.
Tough on crime, but also obey the rules and regulations for policing. And you talk about police choking. You talk about bad apples. But a lot of people look at the statistics. Black Americans more than 3 times more likely than white Americans to be killed by police. And that indicates that this just isn't bad apples. This just isn't choking. This is a real systemic, endemic problem. Do you believe that? What will you do to address it?
So I just saw a poll where African Americans in this country, black communities, are 81% in favor of having more police. They want more police. They want protection. They suffer more than anybody else by bad police protection. All minorities, whether it's Hispanic or black or Asian, they suffer more than anybody else, George. We have to give the police back the authority to stop crime. When you have something like in Portland where it's just night after night, I could stop that with the people we have in a half an hour if they'd let me do that. But they don't.
What would you do?
Bring in the National Guard. We'd bring it in, and we would stop that within. Well, we did it in Minneapolis. Take a look at Minneapolis.
But how do you stop police killing blacks at 3 times the rate of killing whites?
I can only say this, that the police in this country have done generally a great job. There are crimes, there are problems, and there are chokers. They choke under pressure. I mean, they have 1/4 of a second to make a decision, and sometimes they make a wrong decision, and that's a terrible thing. The problem is that'll be on the news for 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a row, and the hundreds of thousands and thousands of good acts, nobody talks about.
So you didn't think that's a sign of systemic racism?
No, I think there's problems, but I also think there's some very big problems where if you don't give the police back their authority. Right now, police are afraid they're going to lose their pension. They're going to lose their job if they talk to somebody in the wrong way. When I watch New York, the New York City police endorsed me, and I love them. They're
one group of the New York City police.
But I watched 6 months ago policemen walking down a street, and people were dumping water on their head. They had absolutely no fear. There was no retribution. I thought it was a low point. I thought it was a low point for New York City's finest. And frankly, those cops should have turned around and really done something.
We have another question on this subject from Pastor Carl Day. He's from Philadelphia, voted for Jill Stein last time.
How you doing, Mr. President?
Good.
You've coined the phrase, make America great again.
Right.
When has America been great for African Americans in the ghetto of America? Are you aware of how tone deaf that comes off to African American community?
Well, I can say this. We have tremendous African-American support. You've probably seen it in the polls. We're doing extremely well with African-American, Hispanic-American at levels that you've rarely seen a Republican have. If you talk about Make America Great, if you look at just prior to, and I'm talking about for the black community, you look just prior to this horrible situation coming in from China when the virus came in, that was probably the highest point. Home ownership for the black community. Home ownership, lower crime, the best jobs they've ever had, highest income, the best employment numbers they've ever had. If you go back and you want to look over many years, you could just go back 6 or 7 months from now. That was the best single moment in the history of the African-American people in this country, I think, I would say.
Well, I mean, your statement is, though, make it great again. So historically, the African-American experience, especially in these ghettos that have been redlined, historically, these ghettos that have systemically been set up and treated the way that they have been, the conditions of the drugs, the guns, and everything else that actually created the symptoms for what we see, that you profess to be just the democratic cities in themselves. These things have historically been happening for African-Americans in these ghettos, and we have not been seeing a change. Quite frankly, under your administration, under the Obama's administration, under the Bush, under the Clinton, the very same things happen, and the very same systems and cycles continue to ensue.
President doesn't run those ghettos.
And we need to see, because you say again, we need to see when was that great, because that pushes us back to a time in which we cannot identify with such greatness. And I mean, you've said everything else about choking and everything else, but you have yet to address and acknowledge that there's been a race problem in America.
So if you go, well, I hope there's not a race problem. I can tell you there's none with me, because I have great respect for all races, for everybody. This country is great because of it. But when you go back 6 months and you take a look at what was happening, you can't even compare that with past administrations. When you look at income levels and a lot of things, because of the job situation where they had the lowest income, the best unemployment numbers they've ever had, the black community by far. And that was solving a lot of problems. And you know what else it was? It was bringing people together. I was starting to get, just before this was, we were having a long run of success, I was starting to get calls from Democrats that, hey, it's starting to work. Let's get together. People that you would never have thought this would have happened with. There was going to be unity, but unfortunately that was hurt because we got set back. But now, I think next year is going to be one of our best years economically.
But income equality is still, income equality is higher. So, I mean, jobs can be produced, but at the same time, in a lot of these big major cities where African Americans are underserved, under-resourced, that's an $8 hour job. Does not mean that they can necessarily afford to live where they have to live or where they've been living at for the last 20 years. Well, the income inequality, which I agree with you, is a problem. I always agreed with that. But if you look under President Obama and Biden, the income inequality was phenomenal. It was record-setting. It was
It's
terrible.
getting worse now.
Well, we're talking about a plague coming in. Before the plague, we were doing very well. Now, we will soon be doing well again because we're going to have a fantastic third quarter. You're seeing the numbers come in. I think you're going to have a GDP that's mid-20s and maybe much higher. Somebody said 35. I don't know. These are all records we're talking about. And you're going to have a very good, economically, you're going to have a very good year next year. But I agree with a lot of the things you say, but you have to look back because we really had it going well. Had we not been hit by this horrible disease that came into our land and all over the world, by the way, came all over the world, we would be in a position where I think income inequality would be different. It was really getting there. We were really driving it down,
we have to move on. But even before the pandemic, the average black family was earning half of what the average white family was earning, even if you hold education constant.
You're right. I can only compare it to the past. the African American, the black community was doing better than it had ever done by far, both in terms of unemployment, home ownership, so many different statistics, even in terms of
But there was
crime.
still a gap between blacks and whites.
I mean, there was a gap, but we were doing a good job. It was getting better. And then it was artificially shut down by this disease that came onto our land.
We've got to take another break. We'll be right back.
There he is. George Stephanopoulos wasn't able to get his dishonest barbs in there. George Stephanopoulos, the former communications director for President Bill Clinton. I don't know why Republicans indulge this fantasy, this fiction that George Stephanopoulos is an objective journalist. I don't know why. Do we think that any Democrat would indulge the delusion that a former Republican press secretary or communications director at the presidential level is objective? Sit down for interviews as though, hey, I'm just going to call it like it is. I don't think so. The guy, George Stephanopoulos, was as partisan as they get. Why we do this, I don't know. I guess it's because we have just completely lost control of those institutions. The man who was asking those questions is absolutely pathetic. He should be very embarrassed of himself. That man blaming everybody else, not everybody else, he was blaming Trump for all of his problems and all of other people's problems. Wow, 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 woe is me, victimhood, victimhood, victimhood. He says, what about the ghettos? What about the ghettos? All the ghettos are in Democratic-run cities, all of them, all of them. Well, but Mr. President, you didn't fix it. And America, what is he saying? He said, America has never been great for black people. I mean, this is the lie. This is the absolute lie that is at the heart of the Black Lives Matter movement. That and George Stephanopoulos was indulging this too. He says, black people are more likely to be arrested. Now, part of the reason why he brought that up is because he was, and this is a Democratic strategy, he is trying to prompt the president into bringing up rates of crime, because obviously if one group of people is committing more violent crime, and even beyond that, if more violent crime is happening in neighborhoods that have a preponderance of one particular demographic, then that can be interpreted as being racist, but it's obviously not racist. You saw this in New York with the stop and frisk policy. What you heard in the stop and frisk issue in New York was that black people are being stopped by the cops. What they didn't tell you is that the majority of NYPD cops were racial minorities. It was a majority minority NYPD, and the crimes were being called into black neighborhoods by black people and Hispanic people in those neighborhoods. But we were told it's white supremacist and it's racist. So what he was trying to do there is back Trump into a corner where either it looks like he's a racist because there's not perfect racial parity in the country on every single statistic. That's one way. And then the other one is to try to goad him into saying something that will try to stop the momentum that he has of support among black voters. So either way, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. That's why President Trump stuck to that answer. He just said, black people are doing better in this country than ever before until you Democrats shut down the country with this ridiculous lockdown. But he wouldn't even go that far because he doesn't want to politicize the virus in the way that the Democrats have. So he says, until this plague came in from China. It was a good answer. I think he's handling it pretty well. I just wonder why we pretend that George Stephanopoulos is a journalist. All right, let's take some questions. Kelly, Trump looked like he held his own. Yeah, I think he's doing very well. Also, we had that tech issue at the beginning where we missed, 15 minutes or so of some of the program and the questions. And I was about to write to the producer who was in charge of this and say, hey, buddy, you're not coming to Nashville, because it was a big problem. But the issue is, because this was pre-taped, it's airing at different times in different places. And in Los Angeles, it's actually not airing for another several hours. So we had to use all sorts of nefarious ways to get in there and bring this to you. All the more reason for us to move closer to the East Coast so that we can bring you those things more quickly. But we appreciate your patience, even as we were having those tech glitches early on. Joe says, question number 1, when is Candy Owens running for president? Candy Owens? Is that Candace Owens are you referring to? My friend Candace? Are you calling her Candy? It's a good nickname. I kind of like that. Maybe I will text her and say, hey, Candy, how you doing? I don't know. She'd be a great candidate, though. I would certainly encourage her to run for office. I think she would be a very, very strong candidate. Oh, then he goes, OMG, I meant Candace. Okay. Aaron, what kind of whiskey are you drinking? I'm drinking Knob. You know, I like knob. It's because my producer is from Tennessee. He's a little more into that kind of mash bourbon territory. I myself, more of a Scotch guy, but I'll take what I can get. I love a good glass of Knob Creek. Margot, no more 6:30 a.m. showtime for you? Unfortunately, I think I probably will still have a 6:30 a.m. showtime. We'll just have to see what time that's going to air. But yeah, I don't think they're going to let me sleep in, which is actually kind of fun. I hate waking up that early, but I like it because it does give you more time in the day. And there is a lot to get done these days, especially as we head into the election. Ben says, you should move to Memphis or something. I drove from New York to LA when I moved out here 6 years ago. I stopped in many cities. The only city that I spent an extra night in, by the way, was Nashville because we had such a good time. But we went to Memphis, and it was the only city where I was almost mugged. And it was a great situation where a pal of mine, and we were on Beale Street. We were having a couple adult beverages, you know, and we decided to light up some cigars. Then we were just walking maybe a block or two off of Beale Street. And some guy who looked like he was trying to break into a car jumps in and says, "Yo, fellas, get over here." And we ran away. I'll leave you on that cliffhanger. We'll get back to President Trump. We'll finish my mugging story at the next break.
But I don't want to say it, but they're Democrat-run cities. It is what it is.
So will you be calling the speaker in? Can you hammer out a deal?
At the right time, yes. I would like to see additional stimulus for people that really, it wasn't their fault, wasn't your fault, wasn't anybody's fault. It was China's fault. I don't care how you want to define it. This was China's fault, and our people shouldn't be hurt, and we should do stimulus. We did a lot of it initially, and now they stopped because they think it's going to be better for the election. I don't know.
They say if you'll come up, they said we'll meet you halfway on the money.
Well, we can do something maybe, but I'm just hearing for the first time about an hour ago that maybe there is a chance to get something, and I'd like to do it. I would like to see it happen, George.
Next question's on health care. It comes from Elise Block. She's from Philadelphia, an assistant professor who voted for Hillary Clinton last time.
Hi. Mr. President. I was born with a disease called sarcoidosis. And from the day I was born, I was considered uninsurable. That disease started in my skin, moved to my eyes, into my optic nerves, and when I went to graduate school, into my brain. When it hit my brain, I was automatically eligible for disability for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. I chose instead to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, and become a professor.
It's great.
It is great, except I still have similar healthcare problems. It costs me, with copays, I'm still paying almost $7,000 a year in addition to the copay, and should pre-existing conditions which Obamacare brought to fruition be removed?
No.
Please stop and let me finish my question, sir. Should that be removed within a 36 to 72 hour period without my medication, I will be dead. And I want to know what it is that you're going to do to assure that people like me who work hard, we do everything we're supposed to do, can stay insured. It's not my fault that I was born with this disease. It's not my fault that I'm a black woman and in the medical community I'm minimized and not taken seriously. I want to know what you are going to do about that.
This woman.
So, first of all, I hope you are taken
She
seriously.
got a PhD, shows you everything wrong with the university system.
And we are not going to hurt anything having to do with pre-existing conditions. We're not going to hurt pre-existing conditions. And, in fact, just the opposite. If you look at what they want to do, where they have socialized medicine, they will get rid of pre-existing conditions. If they go into Medicare for All, which is socialized medicine, and you can forget about your doctors and your plans, just like you could forget under President Obama. He said you can have your doctor, you can have your plan, and that turned out to be a lie. And he said it 28 different times, at least. We have 28 different times. You can have your doctor, you can have your plan. Well, it's not true. But what we're doing is we're going to be doing a health care plan, pre-existing, protecting people with pre-existing conditions. As an example, yourself. It sounds like that's exactly perfect. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're going to be doing a health care plan very strongly. and protect people with pre-existing conditions. I will say this, they will not do that because they have socialized,
I have to stop
they
you
have
there.
socialized
I just have to stop you there because it's just on a couple of points. Number one, Joe Biden has ran against Medicare for all in the primaries, but much more importantly, Obamacare guaranteed people with pre-existing conditions could buy insurance, guaranteed they could buy it at the same price as everyone else, guaranteed a package of essential benefits, guaranteed that insurance companies couldn't put a lifetime limit on those benefits. You fought to repeal Obamacare. You are arguing.
Well, I essentially did.
You're arguing in the Supreme Court right now to strike it down. That would do away with pre-existing conditions.
So that we can do new health care.
But you've been promising a new health care plan. I interviewed you in June of last year. You said the health care plan would come in 2 weeks. You told Chris Wallace that this summer it would come in 3 weeks. You promised an executive order on pre-existing.
I have it already.
But you've been trying to strike down pre-existing conditions.
I have it already, and it's a much better plan for you, and it's a much better plan. And
what is it?
You say Obamacare, I got rid of the individual mandate, which is the worst part of Obamacare.
You're striking down the whole law.
Wouldn't pertain to you, but it pertained to a lot of people where they were going literally bust because they didn't want to have health insurance and they were paying for it anyway, and it was no good. Obamacare was a disaster. Obamacare is too expensive. The premiums are too high. It's a total disaster. You're going to have new health care, and the pre-existing condition aspect of it will always be in my plan, and I've said that loud and clear.
But you haven't come up with it.
And we got rid of the individual mandate, which essentially ended Obamacare. And I had a decision
only
to make.
Because you're arguing
George,
for it.
I had a decision to make. Do I run? We gutted out the worst parts of Obamacare. Now I have to make this decision. This is 3 years ago. Do we run Obamacare well and do a good job and do the best, even though it's never going to be very good? Or do we let it run badly? Probably letting it run badly would have been a better political decision, but I couldn't do that. We have run it so much better than Obama ran it. Now, it's not the same because I got rid of the most unpopular thing and a very unfair thing.
You're trying to strike down the whole law.
George, we have run it really well, but we also have now if you go Department of Labor, our great secretary, as you know, and you know him well, we have other alternatives to Obamacare that are 50% less expensive and that are actually better.
It's been 3.5 years.
George, it's been 40 years since you had good health care. You never really had good health care in this country. This country has never had it. But when you say that Biden doesn't want to do it, everybody else does. Bernie does. He agreed to the manifesto, as I call it. The agreement with Bernie is that you're going to go to socialized medicine.
He ran against
If you go to
Medicare
socialized medicine, well, he agreed. And Harris, who he today said Harris Biden because he thinks she's president, Harris, and someday you'll have to explain that one to me, but Harris is all for doing that. She wants to go to socialized medicine. So you no longer have your doctor really, and you no longer have your plan. And Joe can say all he wants. He's only doing it because he sees his poll numbers going down so substantially. But Joe can say all he wants about health care. Obamacare has been a failure from day one. It's too expensive, whether it's the premium or whether it's the cost generally. And they don't have their doctors and they don't have their plans. We're going to have a very good health care. I think maybe a great health care for less money.
Got to take another break. We'll be right back.
Why do we tolerate George Stephanopoulos? Trump's doing great. I think he's handling this very well, which is he's not letting dishonest George Stephanopoulos take him off the rails here. Remember when Barack Obama was going to solve all of our healthcare problems and he didn't, and they all got much, much worse? And now because Trump is trying to fix that, they're trying to attack him for it, as though he created this problem, a problem that was created in large part by Barack Obama. That woman who asked the question is just unbearable. Could you imagine having to talk to that woman? It'd be very, very difficult. This is the undeserved pride and hubris that comes most notably from the university system today, but from the whole liberal state, which is today a university education carries very little meaning. It carries significance in that you have now a credential that allows you to enter into the sort of society of the liberal state. It's a stamp of approval from the liberal state. But it doesn't mean you're educated at all. So many people get not only bachelor's degrees, but master's degrees, and maybe especially PhDs, who don't know a damn thing about anything. And most importantly, they don't know how to behave when they're speaking to the President of the United States. Education means how you comport yourself as well. When you, in the Italian language, for instance, when someone is ill-behaved, a rude little boy, you'd say he's maleducato, he's badly educated, meaning he wasn't raised right. And clearly this woman wasn't raised right to speak that way to the President of the United States. She's poorly educated. No matter how many meaningless degrees that she has, a little humility goes a long way. It's just a grievance town hall. I mean, that's the way that this is being run, obviously set up by Democrats and run by Bill Clinton's ex-chief Flak. I mean, it's just a complete joke. It is enjoyable. I mean, I guess the one reason to do this kind of an event is because Trump handles these people very, very well. Not a lot of Republicans could go up against someone like George Stephanopoulos. You remember when Mitt Romney went up against Candy Crowley? And Candy Crowley lied during a presidential debate, lied through her teeth. And what did Romney do? He said, well, Candy, I just, are you sure? Well, I don't know. He totally choked and he lost because she lied. And Trump doesn't let them do that. Someone asked in the questions a little bit earlier, I've lost my place there. It says, why doesn't Trump have a sheet with all the perfect statistics on it? It's because statistics are mostly BS, right? 99% of statistics are BS. And what I mean by that is you have your statistics, I have my statistics. The whole idea of statistics is basically 120 years old, at least in the popular mind. And what statistics means is data for the state. It's essentially a statist, rationalist scenario or category, rather. And there are people today who conflate statistics with facts, but those are different things. And what Trump does is he speaks in facts. He says, okay, 87% of whatever does something. That's not an argument. What Trump is making in his own way, in his own Trumpy way, is not arguments from statistics, trying to say that if certain numbers look this way, then that implies a kind of political program. He's making arguments from justice. He's saying, yeah, it's wrong to punch police officers in the face. That's wrong. Wrong to go up and shoot a mother and a young man in a car unprovoked. It's wrong. And I don't care how many stupid, BS, meaningless statistics you throw at me. None of your stupid numbers are going to make that right. And I don't care what you say, ex-Clinton spokesman. And I don't care what you say, you horrible woman who is touting your meaningless PhD and embarrassing herself on national television while complaining about everyone else and accusing people of very terrible things. I just don't care. I'm going to speak the truth. And that's the sort of thing that got this president elected in 2016. It set him apart not just from Hillary Clinton, one of the most rightly despised women in America, but also from the other Republicans who were not willing to speak in those kind of blunt terms. Not willing to do that. And President Trump did do that, and I think that blunt talk is the key. I'm glad he doesn't have a list of statistics. He's rattling them off actually fairly well, but I don't like that. The statistics aren't going to convince people, and they play into left-wing arguments. You got to make arguments from right and wrong, and he's doing that very, very well. Let's turn to some people here. Jamie, what do you mean ex-Clinton spokesman? Jamie, I don't think you should feel bad about not knowing this, because a lot of people don't know this because the media cover it up. But George Stephanopoulos was the White House communications director for Bill Clinton when Bill Clinton was president. He was in the war room. He was a campaign aide to Bill Clinton. He is a Democrat operative who is now pretending to be an objective journalist. When I say he's a Clinton spokesman, I'm not using that in a metaphorical way. I'm saying he literally was Bill Clinton's spokesman. And now we have to pretend like he's a reporter. Do you think a Democrat would agree to sit down with Kayleigh McEnany? Or a Democrat, they better not, they'd get shredded. Do you think they'd agree to sit down with Sarah Sanders? No, I don't think they would. And yet, we have to indulge this. That's the nature of the media. We just need a guy who knows how to swing it right back on the media. Let's tune back in to Mr. Snuffleupagus and the president.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. At times, some have called your behavior not presidential. What, if anything, would you do differently if reelected to create a more unified message where all sides can take responsibilities for their actions and come together to make positive change?
Good, Jim. So I'm fighting a battle It's a big battlefield, and I have a lot of forces against me. I have the media, which I call the fake news, because a lot of it is fake. And I mean as you understand. A lot of it is fake. I'm fighting a lot of forces. Sometimes you don't have time to be totally, as you would say, presidential. You have to get things done. I think I've done more than any other president in the first 3.5 years. When you look at what we've done for tax cuts and regulation cuts and the vets, all of the things that we've done for the vets, we have a 91% approval factor now for the vets. So we rebuilt our military. We created Space Force. I mean, we did so many things. Right to Try, which is so incredible and so successful. You know what Right to Try is? We did more. I really believe it. More than any other president in the first 3.5 years. By the way, at the end of my first term, we're going to have close to 300, maybe over 300 new federal judges, including Court of Appeal, 2 Supreme Court justices. And honestly, we move very fast. And I have to get rid of people fast because they're not doing their job. I could tell you people that weren't doing their job. And when I do that, to get somebody else that is good, and if they don't do it, we get rid of that person. We do a lot of things, and we have to get them done. I could be so I always used to sort of kid on the campaign trail that I could be more presidential. It would be very easy, more presidential than any other candidate except for possibly Abraham Lincoln when he's wearing the hat, right, the high hat. But the fact is, being presidential is easier than what I have to do. But I get things done. I get things done like nobody's ever gotten. When you look at, including environmental things, when you look at what's going on in the country and all that we've done, we unfortunately got hit by this plague, but it's going to be back very soon. We opened it up, and we have, you talk, Jim, about the V. We have a super V. It looks like it's going to be a super V. We're going to have a great economy next year, and I think we're going to have a great economy in the third quarter. And thank you for voting for me in 2016. I hope you're going to do it again.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You talk about a super
Great
V.
answer. Love this guy.
Look at this and say it's more like a K-shaped recovery. The people at the top who have a lot of stocks are doing pretty well. But you've only gotten half the jobs back.
George, stocks are owned by everybody. I mean, if they talk about the stock market is so good. That's 401ks. I'm meeting people with, as long as they didn't sell when the market went down, when we first realized the extent of this horrible thing from China. I mean, these people are doing, some of them are doing better than they were doing before the pandemic came.
So that 13.6 million
people held on to their stocks, and remember this, because I notice you say wealthy. Sure, wealthy, but you have people that aren't wealthy but have done well because of the stock market. I've set records on the stock market even during the pandemic. And that doesn't happen by accident. I will tell you this, if Joe Biden ever got this position, and that's a headwind on the stock market, our stock market would be much higher if it weren't for that. If Joe Biden ever got in, I think you'd have a depression the likes of which we've never seen in this country. If you look at his policies where he wants to raise everybody's taxes, you look at what he wants to do in terms of regulation, where he wants to put all of the regulations back on that I took off and then some, and in many cases double it up, you will have a depression the likes of which we haven't seen in this country. And that doesn't affect big people, it affects everybody. It affects a person that owns $10,000 worth of stock in IBM or whatever company it may be. Look, we're having a tremendous thing in the stock market, and that's good for everybody. But people that aren't rich own stock, and they have 401ks. You take a look at the 401ks. They're, in many cases, better than they were before the pandemic came.
The next question comes from Alexander Stamen from Pittsburgh. Sat out the last presidential election, I believe.
Unfortunately, so I did. Good evening, Mr. President. So I'd like to ask regarding your recent comments about our United States soldiers and referring to them as suckers.
Could you say that again?
Here we go.
Our United States soldiers referring to them as suckers, and particularly the late John McCain, our prisoners of war, as losers.
Okay. It was a fake statement.
And
go ahead.
Recently requesting to ban amputee veterans from a military parade. How do you expect to win back the support of our military, their families, their friends,
What
and
a
military
completely
supporters?
ridiculous.
It's easy, because I never made those statements. They were never made by me. They said I stood over the grave of soldiers killed many years ago, and I said they were suckers. I never made that. Do you know we had 26 people as of today come out to say It never happened, and many people were there. Then they said about the rain didn't happen, and that wasn't the reason. The Secret Service said, we have a statement from them, they said that we could not travel because the helicopter couldn't be used. We would not be able to travel, because when you do that through a major city, it takes them days to get it prepared. I wanted to go anyway. I said, let me just go separately in a car in disguise. I don't care. I wanted to be there so badly. But the statements never happened. They were lies. As far as John McCain, I was never a fan of John McCain. I never thought he treated our vets well. He didn't do the job. I was never a fan of his. And I think that's fine, and everybody knows that. And I said it to his face. I was very much up on that. But as far as
not a war hero,
I have done so much for our vets and for our military. I rebuilt our military. Our military, when I came into this great office, our military was depleted. It was in the worst shape it was in probably ever. It was depleted. The planes were old and broken, the ships, everything. You see what I've done. I've rebuilt $2.5 trillion. And you think that was easy getting that money from Democrats? Because they don't like the military. This magazine came up. They made up this quote. It was a made-up quote. And, you know, the gloves are off with Biden, who I've never respected greatly. I've never respected him greatly, but when they took this made-up quote that was now knocked out by over 25 people, and they made an ad out of it, I thought it was a disgrace. Do you know what disinformation is? That's what it was. They made up a phony quote, and then they went with it. It was a phony deal, and the one who started it was a big friend of President Obama and Clinton, and it was a phony deal from a not very successful magazine.
Mr. President, you have used language like that in the past. You did say that John McCain wasn't a war hero, and notably silent in the wake of this article were General John Kelly, who was your chief of staff at the time, General James Mattis, who served as defense secretary for you.
Yeah, notably silent at the time of this article were people who publicly despise you. Isn't that weird, Mr. President? No, I don't think so.
You're not trying to unite the country. General Kelly said he agreed with that. John Bolton, who was your national security advisor, said you're a danger to the country. The people in these top military positions who serve most closely with you have said you're unfit for office. How do you respond to that?
These are people that I let go. These are disgruntled former employees, to put it in a nice way, with a term people would understand. Mattis was a highly overrated general, didn't do the job, didn't do good on ISIS. I took over 100% of the ISIS caliphate. I had the people that I wanted in. Mattis was fired, as you know, by President Obama, and I fired him also.
He says he resigned.
He didn't resign. I said, give me a letter. No more. Give me a letter. I was being nice. One of the problems when you're nice, oftentimes it comes back to hit you. I said, Jim, give me a letter. It's time for you to move on. He gave me a letter, but I fired him. That's called, I fired him. Now, General Mattis didn't do the job. I wasn't happy with him. If you look at John Bolton, all he wanted to do is blow people up. He wanted to go to war with everybody. And frankly, I used him very nicely. I bring him into a room in a negotiation. When people saw them, they said, oh, wow, he's going to go to war. I'm bringing our troops back from Afghanistan. I'm bringing our troops back from Iraq. We're almost out of almost every place. You know, everybody said, because of my personality, they said he'll be in a war immediately. Look at North Korea, how that's worked out. We haven't, the sanctions are on, everything's the same. We haven't spent anything. We're getting along with them. I get along with Kim Jong-un. That was supposed to be a war. If President Obama were president, if Hillary Clinton never got in, that would be a war. We would have a war, probably a nuclear war with North Korea. In the meantime, I'm getting calls all the time from friends of mine in South Korea. Thank you. We love you. Thank you. It's really been rather amazing. So instead of wars, everybody said, look at what we had today with the United Arab Emirates and UAE, and just take a look at what happened with Israel today. With that, take a look at what's going on. If that was going to be a problem. We're actually creating peace in the Middle East without blood staining our sand. So but look at what happened with Bahrain.
Jim Mattis.
But George, look at today what happened with Bahrain. Look at well, a guy like Jim Mattis would have disagreed with the way I went about it, and I've turned out to be correct. Tom Friedman of the New York Times wrote incredible, glowing articles. last week about this incredible thing that I've been able to do in the Middle East. A guy like Jim Mattis could have never done it because they were all doing it the old-fashioned way. They were going in the wrong outlets and the wrong doors. And what happened today with UAE and with Bahrain and with Israel, people don't even believe it. And George, as sure as you're sitting there, I have numerous other countries in that region that are going to be signing very soon also. You'll have peace in the Middle East. And this is without war and without losing, and I'm talking about on both sides, but without losing our great young soldiers. You know, I go to Dover and I greet oftentimes soldiers coming in and they're dead. And there's no sadder thing than to sit with a widow or a mother and watch these big, massive cargo planes, and that back opens up, and these incredible Marines are walking off a casket, and they were killed in the Middle East, and in many ways, nobody even knows why. Going there was the worst decision in the history of our country. We've spent $8 trillion, and we've lost thousands of lives, but really millions of lives, because I view both sides, okay, if that's okay. Millions of lives. This was the worst decision. And by the way, Iraq did not Saddam Hussein did not knock down the World Trade Center, in case you don't know. I'm sure you do know that. They said they had weapons of mass destruction. They made a mistake. So we're now $8 trillion. We've been in there for 20 years, almost 20 years. In Afghanistan, I guess it's getting very close to that. It's over 19. And we're bringing our soldiers back home. Nobody expected that from me. And people are so happy about it. And you know who's the happiest of soldiers? I see them all the time. What do you think? Should we be here? No, sir, you shouldn't be here. Why? They don't like us, sir. And I'll tell you what, I've rarely met a soldier that's over there. They're better than anybody because they can tell you better than anybody what's happening. Rarely do I meet a soldier that says we should be there. It was the worst mistake, the most costly mistake in the history of our country going into the Middle East.
I'm going to be right back.
Not a lot of Republicans are going to say that. Most Republicans are going to toe the party line, even if they disagree, even if they think, one, we shouldn't have gone into Iraq, or two, if they do think we should have gone into Iraq, that we should have gotten out of the Middle East sooner and not been in Afghanistan for 20 years. And Trump will just go say, yeah, look, I don't know. I wasn't a professional politician for 50 years like Joe Biden. I didn't vote for the Iraq war like Joe Biden. So I think it was a bad idea. I'm glad we're out. Stephanopoulos is obviously weighing in as best he can to make Trump look bad, but Trump is stomping all over him. It makes me realize, yes, the media, the mainstream media, are the enemy of the people. I think that is a fair statement. But our enemy can become our friend if you can outfox them. And Trump, love him or hate him, the guy is outfoxing the media. His answers are great. That woman's ridiculous question was based on this Atlantic story that was only written on anonymous sources. Now, anonymous sources can occasionally be used in journalism, but they really shouldn't be. You should minimize how many anonymous sources you're using. That ridiculous, calumnious article that said that Trump hates the troops. Donald Trump, who kneels down and picks up the hats of Marines and puts them back on their head. Donald Trump hates the troops, right? Rebuilt the whole military, but hates the troops. It was written based on 4 anonymous sources, and that's it. And then a Fox News reporter, of all people, a Fox News reporter confirmed the story by talking to an anonymous source, which is just on a fundamental ontological level not possible. You can't confirm a story based on anonymous sources with an anonymous source. That's not confirming anything. Meanwhile, as of yesterday, it was 21. Now, I guess it's 25 or 26 people have gone on the record saying the story is not true. So who are you going to believe? And then Stephanopoulos says, well, how come people who hate you haven't come out to defend you? You say, do I really have to explain that to you, George Stephanopoulos? He goes, well, you have said terrible things about veterans, like John McCain. Oh, the great Saint John, who we Democrats love, as long as he's not a threat to us. We're so nice to him, except the one time he tried to actually get close to being president, and then we killed him. John McCain, as though you can't criticize John McCain. I think there are plenty of reasons to criticize John McCain. You can say, I'm thankful that he served our country. He had good qualities, and like anybody, he had bad qualities. But just because he did certain heroic things doesn't mean that you can't criticize the man. He was a politician for most of his life. And he was, in some ways, a controversial politician because he was a liberal Republican. Right? He was a Republican, a moderate Republican. And so he was the reason that we still have Obamacare today. Because he came in and voted against it, even after campaigning on for years and years how he was going to repeal Obamacare. So, yeah, I think there are reasons to criticize John. We're not allowed to criticize John McCain. That means you hate the troops? I don't think so, Buster. I don't think so. How do you all think he's doing? Let's see. Margot says Knowles has no bad qualities. Thank you, Margot. I appreciate that. It's very kind. I was going to say, we all have these kind of qualities. Present company excluded, obviously. David, McCain was a Dem. No, I don't think McCain was a Dem. I think he played into a Democratic superstructure. I think that it's actually, in a way, it's sort of politically worse than being a Dem because he played the role of political court jester in the kingdom of liberalism. He was the sort of Republican who justified left-wing premises. He referred to conservatives as wacko birds, famously. He pushed blatantly unconstitutional campaign finance legislation, McCain-Feingold. He was a Republican who didn't act like a Republican. He acted like a Republican some of the time, but he acted like a Democrat a lot of the time too, and he was dishonest in his campaigning. So I voted for the guy in 2008. It's the first presidential vote I ever cast. Certainly wasn't going to vote for Obama, but the situation's in some ways even worse than if he were just a Democrat because he politically betrayed people who were his co-partisans. George is a joke of a reporter. Yeah, he's a successful one because that liberal state props you up if you are useful to them. Even to Republicans, they'll do it to Republicans. Think of Jeff Flake or Mitt Romney. Now they're propping up those guys just as a way to justify their own power and points of view. By the way, guys, we're going to be hanging out after this town hall. It's probably wrapping up pretty soon. And you can head on over to dailywire.com. You got to be an all-access member. If you use the coupon code WATCH, you will save 15% on your all-access membership. That is the elite tier. That's how we all get to know each other and talk. And even beyond just talking to the hosts and the writers, you'll also get to talk to each other. It's a very sophisticated group of people. I'm not flattering you. I steal your ideas regularly, and so I have an incentive for you to become an all-access member too. So head on over there. We're back in the town hall. We'll cut into that, and we'll get back to it later.
Police reform without sacrificing public safety in a time when part of the country is calling to defund the police and actively cheering when they're gunned down in the street, and another part is tired of seeing the lawlessness.
So we have a great senator named Tim Scott from South Carolina, and he had a plan that was very much of a compromise plan, but it was a plan that everybody pretty much agreed to. A lot of Democrats agreed to it, but they wouldn't vote for it. And it was it was a compromise of a lot of different factors. And it didn't get done, and it should have gotten done. And it could still be out there, could still be resurrected very easily, but they just didn't want to do it. Because I think the Democrats are viewing this as a political issue, and I probably agree with them. I think it's very bad for them, because we're about law and order. We have to be about law and order. Otherwise, you're going to see your cities burn. And that's the way it is. If we can do a plan like Tim Scott's plan, which is really, it goes far enough, but it doesn't take the dignity away from our police. We have incredible people. They've been protecting us for a long time. I mean, we're here, and I feel very safe being in this room. These are great people. We can't take their dignity away. We have to let them be able to do what they do better than anybody else. So I think we have to look at it that way. We have to be very, very careful. Police are so afraid today that they do something slightly wrong, and their pension's gone, their job's gone. Who knows what happens? Their life is ruined. Their wife or their husband will leave. The whole thing, it's a very scary thing to do. And then you look at safety. I mean, you look at that horrible human being that shot these two police, cold blank right next, just a disgusting, and then ran off. You look at that, this is a very tough job, and it's a very unsafe job. It's a very dangerous job. We have to give them back their dignity, and we have to give them back respect. These are great people for the most part. There's always going to be a bad apple in your business, in my business, no matter what. I mean, there's going to be bad apples, so we have to weed out the bad apples. But we have to give We have to give the police back that strength that they had a short while ago, and that they have in Republican cities, frankly, and states. But you take a look. This is a Democrat problem, George. I know you're a Democrat, but this is largely a Democrat problem. If you just take a look at the list, every Democrat city, almost, not all, but a lot of them, certainly in the top 25, even if you go the top 50, almost every city is run by the Democrats. People don't respect our police,
President,
and they have to respect
You
them.
promised 4 years ago at the Republican convention, I'm going to restore law and order
And
in
I
this
have,
country.
except in Democrat-run cities. Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that, even in a Portland case. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor. If a governor or a mayor is a Democrat, and they don't, like in Portland, we call them constantly. I just spoke to the governor yesterday because we're giving them relief on the fires. We're giving them an emergency declaration. I said, Governor, let us go in and we'll clean up Portland so fast. In a half an hour, it'll be all right. And she's just torn by it. I don't understand the thinking, but they're torn by it. I have a lot of respect for the governor. Frankly, in what happened in Minneapolis was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, this went on for a week or a week and a half before he allowed us to bring in the National Guard. When we brought in the National Guard, everything stopped. The crime was gone, meaning the whole thing. But by that time, a big portion of the city was burned down. You're talking about Minneapolis. In Seattle, we let them know we're coming in. They took over a big chunk of the city, 20% of the city. We said we're coming in. As soon as we said that, the police department went in, and these other people were exhausted. But had we not said we're going in, we were ready to go in. We were going in the following morning. Wherever you have a Democrat city, not in all cases, but if you look at the really troubled cities in our country, they're Democrat-run, and that's Biden. They're weak. They're ineffective.
You're president for those cities right now.
I'm president, but I can only do what I'm allowed to do, George. I don't need insurrection. I don't need an insurrection act to take care of 250 anarchists. We can do that very easily with the National Guard. We proved that in Minneapolis. They came in after the city was burning. And the thing I don't really get is that the news media is saying, no, these are peaceful, these are peaceful. And right over the reporter was a CNN reporter, right over his shoulder, and you saw that, right over his shoulder, the city is burning. It looked like it was Berlin during the war. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And he's trying to say, I don't know why the news media tries to make so light of it. These are not protests. These are far greater than protests.
Got to take another quick break.
Do you hear how disappointed George Stephanopoulos was there? He goes, Trump is doing well. He's doing well. We'll take a quick break. Damn it. Come on, guys. We need more hostile questions. Trump came prepared. He's doing a great job. He's doing a great job at this. I will be the first to admit, even though obviously I like Trump and I'm going to vote for him, but I will be the first to admit when he doesn't handle these things very well or when he goes off on tangents that he shouldn't. He's handling this very well. My fear going into this was that he would handle it like a rally, meaning it would be so aggressive that the whole thing would just be a shouting match with Stephanopoulos, and even if he were right, he would come off looking bad in this kind of quiet and subdued environment. But that's not what's happening. Not what's happening at all. Trump comes in there very prepared. He's measured. He's listening to people. Even when people are lying through their teeth, he goes, yeah, not true. Okay, yeah, finish. He's letting people finish what they're saying. Then he comes out and he's tough. He's not weak. He's not letting it slide. He's getting all of his points, and he's likable. He's likable. Someone in the chat, let me see if I can find this. Yeah, a lot of people are saying he's doing very well. Jennifer Joe also saying he's doing well. David says he loves me. Thank you, David. I love you too, as a brother in Christ. I don't know if you're getting a little romantic here, but let's just, maybe we'll leave it in the kind of brotherhood of man. Some people are going after John McCain a little bit. But someone, I can't find the comment now, but someone said, I'm 44 years old. I think his name was Alexander. I'm 44 years old, and I've never in my adult life had affection for a president like this guy. And that's the key. That's the key. And he hit the nail on the head. Trump hit the nail on the head with that question from that woman who said, or no, it was a question from that man who said, Mr. President, I kind of like what you're doing, but what do you make of people who say that you're too mean, that you're not presidential in your demeanor? And Trump didn't say, look, I'm the most presidential. He didn't do that. He goes, look, yeah, I'm Trump. I'm Trump, and you elected me, and I'm a brash guy from Queens who is a TV star, and that's me, okay? But look what I've done. And what the question and Trump's answer justify is actually a thesis Ann Coulter put out, which was in 2016. I think she wrote this book with a kind of silly title called E Pluribus Awesome, In Trump We Trust. It's funny because the title was ridiculous, but the book was good. It was a good thesis. And her thesis basically was, everyone thinks that people voted for Trump because of his personality in spite of his policies. But actually, it's the opposite. Actually, people voted him in spite of his personality and because he was offering different policies, because he was offering different experience. And that's what he said. He was like, yeah, look, you might not like me. You might not like me. But look what I've done. You're hiring me to do a job for you. I'm doing a job. I've done a much better job than my predecessors, and I'll continue to do a better job. Margot says, I love you, my brother. Thank you, Margot. Right back at you, sister. Annalisa says, lol, I like you, Michael. Why do you say lol? Why lol, I like you? Why not just I like you? Joshua, I don't like you, Knowles, but you are warming up to me enough that I spoke to my mother-in-law about you. I guess I'll take that as a compliment. That's fine. Laura, Michael, are you old enough to remember Mr. Snuffleupagus? You know, I consider myself an old soul. Depending on the day, I look like I'm 12, but I think deep down I'm a little bit older. Some people say, Michael, you want to go back to the 1950s. I actually want to go back to the 1350s, but that's a little too old, probably. Annalisa, people want emotions, not an actual president. Well, they want both. They want both because, Ben says facts don't care about your feelings, which is true. But also politics cares about your feelings, and we care about people's feelings. And so obviously you need a little bit of both in politics. When Ben says facts don't care about your feelings, he's attacking a very specific left-wing point of view, which is that there's no such thing as objective reality. And obviously that's what the left has been pushing. You need both, but I think Trump has both. I mean, you ever consider how weird it is that a billionaire who was born to a very wealthy father, who inherited a family business, who has, basically partied with supermodels his whole life, is very relatable to basically every American, from CEOs down to construction workers. Actually, he's more relatable to construction workers than he is to CEOs, because in a way, he's an outsider. Right? He's not, no matter how much money he has, no matter how famous he is, he's not in the kind of liberal established circle. Right? He's not invited to all of those parties. It's certainly not now. I find that to be pretty relatable. So there is an emotional quality there too, which draws people to him. Let's turn back to the president.
Oh, very good.
Thank you so much. Hi, Mr. President, Mr. George. Hi, everyone. My name is Flor Cruzeta. Sorry if I can't hold my tears.
I love what you just did.
I came in 2006 with my mom from Dominican Republic. Sorry.
That's all right, and just take your time. That's fine. George has plenty of time, I hope, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Did you say your mom got COVID?
We came from Dominican Republic in 2006 to live our American dream. But she forgot how to take care of herself. And she died last month. Sorry.
Terrible, and that's okay. It's okay.
She have breast cancer, but it made metastasis on her brain, bone, and lungs. She passed on the 19th. One of her biggest dreams was to become a citizen to vote, and she did. She did 10 days before she died, and I did it too. She pushed me so hard to do it, and I did it this past 28. I'm here because of her. She was supposed to be here and ask you and thank you for the stage you take during this epidemic. You made people closer. We lost our job, but we learned how to love our family. So I'm saying that from her.
Very nice.
Her question for you was, because she wrote this question, what would you do for our immigration system? What would you change to make more people like me and like her to become citizens and vote?
So we are doing something with immigration that I think is going to be very strong, because we want people to come into our country, people like you and like your mother. And that just shows how vicious the COVID is, especially when you have another problem. You have a heart problem or another type of a problem. And it's a very sad story. But we want people to come into our country. We want them to come in, a lot of people, but we want them to come in through a legal system, through a system that they love our country, they work to come into our country, a merit system. And we're working on something very hard right now, and in a very short time we're going to be announcing it, and I think it's going to have quite an impact. I think it's going to be something that actually will be popular for all. I mean, as far as your situation with your mother, that is just devastating, because I can imagine how you feel. And sounds like a great woman. And I'll tell you, I'm pretty good with people. She gave us a great daughter, a great child. What she's done with you, the way you are, the love that you have for your mother, I can see that. It's hard. And so many people, and they die alone. They die alone because this is such a vicious thing. You can't go there and hold their hand. You can't give them a kiss goodnight. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And hopefully the vaccines are going to be very soon. Hopefully. Did you have COVID? You didn't have it, right?
No.
You didn't have it, your mother. We'll have it taken care of. It's going to get taken care of. The vaccines are going to make a big difference. What has made a big difference is remdesivir. We have many things now, and things are going to be announced, which frankly, if you take a look at some of the things we're doing in terms of, the word wouldn't be cure, but the word would be therapeutically or therapeutics. We have some incredible things happening, which is so important. And I view that actually in a certain way as more important than the vaccine, where you can go into a hospital and get your mother and give her a transfusion or a shot, and they can get better much faster. So we have some of those things, and they've been very, very successful, but we have others coming out. And in order to get them, we had to get the FDA to approve this product, these, very sophisticated medicines, and I guess you could call them a medicine, but we had to get them approved very quickly, and they did it. Dr. Hahn, the head of the FDA, Alex Azar, they've really done a fantastic job. I believe, George, that none of this would have happened in another administration. And I think you know that. The FDA is approving things at a level that they've never done, and at speed with which they've never acted before.
The question is it being done safely? We've got to take another break.
Well, we're going to make sure
right
it is, yes.
That jerk, George Stephanopoulos. Yeah, look, this is all great, and we're going to get through this together. Yeah, but the question is it being done safely? Okay, we got to go now. And then Trump, he's like, we're not going to go. Yeah, it's being done safely. There's your answer. We're not going to get back to it. That's the answer. What a jerk. Now, that woman, obviously, very moving story. She's got, got a thick accent, and she's crying, and she's talking about immigration. But she's not saying, Trump, you killed my mother, like the Democrats tried during the DNC. She says, look, I like you. My mother liked you. And she's dead now, and it's very heart-moving. And then the question is, how are you going to make it so that more people can come into America? Right, and that's a non sequitur. That doesn't follow from her question. Obviously, we want people like her. We want people like her mother. We want people who are nice and respectful and love the country and vote for good people and they don't vote for bad people. We want that. But the fact is, the majority of Americans, we're talking now about people in both parties, think there should be less immigration. Not because we don't like people, but just because the country can't take all those people in at once without having real social problems that make it worse for everybody, including the people coming in. So in there, what they're trying to get Trump to do is say, yeah, we want way more people, but because that's actually politically very unpopular, and it will help split away some of his base. His answer was good. He goes, look, we've got a strong plan that everyone is going to like, right? He's speaking in kind of vague terms. And then he gets specific. He says, we want people like you. We don't want people like MS-13, but we want people like you. So he's getting into the specifics here, right? Not just the kind of platitudes of the Democratic Party. You know, whatever, diversity is our strength and whatever. This is occupied land and colonialism, whatever. He's not doing that. He's getting specific. He's saying, yeah, we want you. We don't want that guy, but we do want you. We want him. We want that. But we are going to get that plan out when we can get that plan out. Obviously, nothing's going to get passed when we've got a split government like we have. And then he pivots it and he says, you know, I'm really sorry about your mother. Because that's the thing, right? The part of the question that is compelling, that people want to look at, is like, oh, this poor woman who's got a real human problem and her mother died, and some of us can relate to that, and some of us can imagine how bad that is. And if it's from COVID, and you probably couldn't even go to a funeral, and it's like so horrible. And what we want is to see the president react in a human way. And he did. He did, because the importance of that response is it shows that the liberal caricature of Trump is precisely that. It's a caricature. It's ridiculous. They're saying that a guy who became a top developer, a top businessman, a top reality television show host, and won the most powerful office on earth on his first try at politics, that guy's not good with people. That guy doesn't like people. That's what they're trying to say. It's not possible. It's not possible to have that kind of success in those fields and not like people. And you see that and you think, oh no, he does have affection for people. You hear it from people around him, not from anonymous sources, but from sources on the record. And then you see that. That's the key here. The question on immigration is a silly question. He gave a perfunctory answer that I thought was good. Then he got to the meat of it. That takes a real emotional intelligence. Let's turn back to the people. Speaking of our affection for people. Laura, I'm confused. What's happening to the Daily Wire? Oh, we're moving to Nashville. That's what's happening. If you're just tuning in, we're moving to Nashville. But you can still find us on the website, wherever you are. The vast majority of Daily Wire members do not live in Los Angeles and probably don't live in Nashville either. They're all over the place. You can get us. Oh, this is important, though, starting on September 28th. If you watch my show on YouTube, you're going to have, or if you watch any of our shows, frankly, you're going to have to go to the Michael Knowles Show YouTube channel. We're going to move the shows from the Daily Wire YouTube channel to our individual show page. I sound like Joe Biden. To our individual show pages. So you've got to go to the Michael Knowles Show YouTube channel, ring the bell, subscribe. You'll get notifications that way. It's just a way to try to make big technology companies that want to shut us up have to continue to play us. So I head over there if you like, and head over to dailywire.com, become an all-access member. Use coupon code WATCH to get 15% off. You know, we have different tiers of membership. All access is the premium, #1, top shelf elite tier. And it means that you'll have all access, so you can, chat with us. We do these all access shows. We're going to be doing it for half an hour after Trump's broadcast tonight. It's great because you get to talk to the hosts and the writers, but more importantly, at least from my perspective, we get to talk to you, and I get to take some of your ideas and figure out how to mold the show and mold what we're talking about. And you get to speak to one another because it's a very, very sophisticated group of people. Obviously, because if you're an all access member, you're paying attention to things. And you're not just paying attention to George Stephanopoulos on ABC News. You're doing your own research. You're finding things on alternative media channels, rather. And so it's a sophisticated group of people. Highly recommend heading over to dailywire.com. Promo code WATCH. You'll get 15% off. And we will be chatting privately, semi-privately, after the president and Mr. Stephanopoulos wrap up their town hall. We turn now back to the president.
Mr. Trump.
Hi, Ashley.
Sorry. My question is, what has been the most difficult part of your presidency, and what have you learned from it?
So I think without question, I would say, because things were going so well, I think I'd have to say the whole COVID, the China virus, as I call it, because it comes from China. I think it's a much more accurate term. But it's been very difficult. It's been so sad. As an example, talking to you about your mother, it's just such a sad situation. Yeah, we're getting there. We will get there. It's going to happen. But it's been a very difficult. Nobody's seen anything like this probably since 1917.
What did you learn from it?
I learned that life is very fragile. I knew people that were powerful people, strong people, good people, and they got knocked out by this and died. 6 people. It was 5 until about 2 weeks ago. Now it's 6. But I've learned that life is very fragile because these were strong people, and all of a sudden they were dead. They were gone. And it wasn't their fault. It was the fault of a country that could have stopped it. And I made a great trade deal with China.
Any of it was your fault?
I feel so differently about that deal now. It's a great deal. It was good for the farmers, good for the manufacturers, but I don't view it the same way. It was good for us, but I don't view it the same way because of the horror of this disease that really could have been stopped at the border.
Could you have done more to stop it?
I don't think so. I think what I did by closing up the country, I think I saved 2, maybe 2.5, maybe more than that lives. I really don't think so. I think we did a very good job. I don't know if that's been recognized. We've made a lot of governors feel good. We've made some reputationally, we've enhanced their reputation. They didn't have anything. We got them the supplies. We got them the ventilators. We've made a lot of people look good that shouldn't look good, to be honest with you.
We're out of time, Mr. President. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all the questioners here. Thanks to all of you at home for watching. Have a good night.
They finally give an even-handed question at the end. They say, what was the toughest aspect of your presidency, and what did you learn from it? Obviously, it's the China virus, and he didn't go there. I probably would have, but he was probably being more politic because he's on network television. He's not on cable news, right? He's on network television. And he says, well, China virus, if it had been me, let's say we were on cable news, I probably would have said, yeah, it's when all the Democrat politicians shut down our entire country over nothing. No scientific basis, no just basis, just to try to screw up the election and then push an absolutely fraudulent and unjust mail-in ballot proposal that is going to try to steal the election afterward. That is what I would have said. But notice what Trump did here. I mean, this was really smart, because if you see Trump on, let's say, Fox or CNN for that matter, or he's talking to some arch partisan like Jim Acosta on CNN, he'll get nasty, he'll get in the weeds, he'll go tit for tat, right? Because that is what cable news is. Cable news is all tit for tat. It's all people just screaming at each other. That's why it's very difficult to watch some of the time. That's why I don't watch very much of it. I prefer to listen to podcasts and look at various alternative media sources, as I imagine you do too. Network TV is not like that. Network TV is generally an older audience. They come from a different era, they have different expectations of TV. They usually don't like the screaming as much. And he's got to be more open to people, and he's got to be a little more respectful and measured, and he was. And this should come as no surprise, guys. First of all, he was on a network for a while, on reality TV, so it was a less measured medium on network. But this guy knows TV. This guy knows the media. We're always shocked. We say, oh, wow, Trump did a good speech. I can't believe it. Oh, Trump, the guy who's been on TV for 50 years? Oh, that guy? Well, can't believe he knows how to speak on TV. He did very well with a vicious moderator and a hostile audience. Handpicked hostile audience. By the way, I see some people are writing in saying, wait a second, what about our memberships on the website? Don't worry, if you don't watch the show on YouTube, then you don't need to worry about the YouTube channel. I know a lot of people who are members will also watch the show on YouTube because they like to be in the comments there, or they use YouTube a lot. So this only applies to YouTube. If you watch it on the Daily Wire YouTube channel, you should now subscribe to the Michael Knowles Show YouTube channel, because after September 28th, that's where the show is going to be. But if you are a member on the website, an all-access member, and any kind of member, I suppose, there are different levels. There's the Reader's Pass, then there's a proper subscription, and then there's the all-access tier. But if you're at those tiers that involve watching the shows without advertisements, you can still do that on the website, even if you're not on YouTube, even if we move to Nashville. All right, so we are going to end our main broadcast. Make sure you go ring the bell over at the Michael Knowles Show channel. Head on over, subscribe. There is still time. Use the code WATCH. You'll get 15% off. dailywire.com for an all-access membership. Now we are going to go chat with the all-access members, and I'm going to steal all of your ideas. So head on over there. We'll be right back.